So we're ready for our very first talk. Paolo, Melchiorre, you will tell us a bit about making the most of Django.
Yeah.
Welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to take a picture of this. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you again in person, finally. In recent year, I've been presenting many technical talks based on Django, but at certain points, I felt the need to share with the community how much benefit I gained from Django along my journey as member of its community. My journey as member of Python community reached a key point in the event immortalized in this photo. Here, I'm one of the participants of Django Code Europe 2019. And with me in this photo, there is for sure some of you, also the organizer of this conference we are in now. The awareness I've gained from then until today is that taking full advantage of open source software means getting involved in its community. I'll try to share various ways I've tried to do this in the hope that it will inspire or even interest you. But first, it seemed my duty to introduce myself. I'm Paolo Melchiorre. I'm the CTO of 20Tab, a Pythonic software company based in Rome. I'm a software engineer and a long-time Python backend developer. After using Django for a few years, I became a contributor to the project. I've always loved attending conferences, and over the years, I've become a speaker. And this represents me today. But my journey of involvement in Django has been a long one. The first step in getting involved in a community is to choose the community itself. In my career as a developer, from high school to the university, I had used many programming languages. But when I was able to, I chose to use Python. By choosing Python, I considered that it had these characteristics: an open source license, a foundation behind it, not a single company, a community capable of giving a direction to development, a code of conduct, and above all, welcoming and positive people, such the creator of Python itself. Guido van Rossum is the reference person of the community. Even if he's no longer the benevolent dictator of life, the Python community is positively affected by his open and welcoming nature. Another community that owes a lot to Guido is the Zope community. Towards development, Guido contributed during the early years of Python. Actually, Zope was the first Python web framework I ever used. The first step towards engagement for me was to join the small Italian community of users of Plone, a Zope-based CMS. A local community is easy for new members to join, has no language barriers, share a common cultural background among its members, and it's easier to share experience and exchange mutual help. Today, the local community of Python and Django are many, like this one, and I invite you to join one of them in your local area. This is a photo of the member of the Italian Plone community in 2007. At the end of OpenL, my first local conference organized in my city, Pescara. In fact, you can see the beach in the background over here. At the time, I had a little experience as a developer, and I was afraid of not being able to contribute in a valid way. And so my involvement in this community was biased. But being part of the Plone community allowed me to learn Python and led me to participate in many Plone conferences. And also in EuroPython 2011, my first Python conference ever, which made me achieve many goals. I learned more about Python language itself. I became aware of Python 3 for the first time, meet other community related to Python, networking with many other members of the community, meeting the friendly companies of Django and Python, and above all, knowing the new emerging project. In fact, I saw my first Django talk there, which I had only heard about before. In this photo, there are diploma developers during Europa 2011. Some of them I met over the year in conference, like this one. Others I followed them online, and others are now part of the Django community with me. I think that people, more than contents, are the greatest value of the conference like this. Shortly after that conference, I started using Django 1.3. Being a more experienced developer, I immediately dived deep in Django, having many benefits. These are the action I did, and I also recommend to you to use a modern version of Python, try the Django tutorial to learn the basics, study the official documentation to have an advanced knowledge, follow the official Django channel to stay updated, and attend specific Django events like this one to get to know other members of the community. This other photo is my first DjangoCon Europe, the 2017 one, held in Florence. I'm on the edge over there. In previous years, I continued to attending conference, but this one was my first DjangoCon, and allowed me to truly feel part of the Django community. I met most engaged members of the community in person, and these things inspired me to really get involved. After 10 years of biased participation in the Python community. The first act of involvement in the community was a contribution to the Django Code, my first one. In a project, I had to use a UID field on existing models. I tried to add a Postgres function in Django to quickly generate random UIDs. After verifying the validity of the solution, I studied the contribution guidelines to Django. I created an issue, my first one, on its tracker and opened a pull request with the solution already tested. The process took me some time, but by then I already learned a lot about Django and the best practice of writing better code. This is my first pull request. As you can see, the reviewers are all experienced Django contributors. There is also the former Django fellow, Tim Graham, who at the end merged it. Having the ability to get reviews of your code from such experienced people is a great way to become a better programmer. No matter how many experienced colleagues you have in your company, I don't think you will ever get a review of your Django code from such expert developers as the core contributors of Django. I was sure I could contribute to a sprint on Django, but after the DjangoCon Europe 2017, I had my own pull request to review, which was a great reason to participate. At the start of the sprint, I proposed to work on my pull request, and I asked for help on how to proceed because it was my first one. And when I felt ready, I asked for a review of my code, and after making the required change, I was able to complete the work and play the gong as the sprint tradition. My pull request was merged a few days later in Django 2.0. In this photo, I'm at the end of the sprint with Mark Tamil, the original creator of Django Postgres module, and Marcus Holterman, a Django core developer, who helped me in my work and review my pull request. Participating in a sprint on Django is a unique opportunity that I recommend you to try. It allows you to connect with many experienced developers, and in the end, you will be a better developer and more aware member of the community. Following Django more closely, I learned of a very interesting new feature, the full text search. After its release in Django 1.10, I studied it, and shortly after I used it for the first time in a Django project. Working with this feature allowed to me to verify what I studied and become more experienced. Pushed by my company, 20Tab, I sent a talk proposal on full text search to my favorite conference, PyCon Italia, which was accepted in 2017 edition. The talk preparation work was very challenging because it was the first one, but I learned a lot more preparing the talk than I ever did working on the project. I successfully presented the talk in Italian, my mother tongue. In this photo, I just gave my first talk ever at PyCon Italia 2017 in a small room of other Italian Django developers, every member of local meetups. The experience were intense. I was really nervous, but I gained more confidence as a member of the community. I received excellent feedbacks. I learned the basics of public speaking. I increased my knowledge on the subject, and I also improved the original project for which all it started. If you have a similar goal, I recommend you to try giving a talk on your favorite subject. In previous conferences, I had met Django girls, which seemed to me a great way to increase diversity in the community. I found that the next workshop will be held in Rimini that day, a couple of hours away by train, by Pescara, and so I signed up as a mentor. I was welcomed in the team of other mentors, and I was put in contact with participants to help them to get ready for the workshop. Taking part in the event was very simple. A really positive experience that I recommend to everyone here. During the event, I also updated the Python and Django version of the tutorial to the new Python version. This is the photo of my Django girls group, the first one I have coached. All smart girls who have completed the whole workshop in the day. And the experience gave me a better confidence as a coach. I understood better the concept of Django that I had to explain, and meet other talented mentors for all over the world because it was international workshop. After my first talk in Florence in Italian, I decided to improve it, and despite my poor English skill, I also sent a proposal to Europa 2017, which that year was held in Italy. My proposal was refused, but I continued to work on that English presentation anyway for future conferences. But a few days before the conference, an organizer proposed me to replace another speaker at last minute, and I immediately accepted. Giving my talk in English was very challenging, more than presenting in Italian. It was my first time, but I had several benefits because the audience was bigger, the participants were international, I got better feedbacks, and my confidence as speaker increased. Also, my English skills increased. This is the photo of my talk in the Europa 2017. In front of me, there was a room full of people who did not speak my language. This experience forced me to go far outside my comfort zone. But my network of contact expanded a lot, and I even received an invitation to give my talk in Postgres conference the next month. At DjangoCon Europe 2017, were planned self-organized sprint. And so I proposed a sprint to work on the search of the official Django website. About 10 developers joined me in the sprint, and by the end of the day, almost everyone had managed to set up the Django website locally, without Docker at the time. We had reported some issue, and we had the proof of concept of the function. Organizing a small sprint was a more challenging experience than just participating, but it gave me the unique opportunity to coordinate the work between excellent developers from many parts of the world. I received specialized help in reaching my goal, learned new working approaches, and expanded the network of contacts, more than if I had been just a participant. This is a photo of my group working on Django during the Europa 2017 sprint. It was a pleasure coordinating such a good developer and to be able to achieve our results at the end of the day. The general atmosphere was unique, with many groups dedicated to different Python sprint and project. An intense experience, but one that I recommend for sure. Working on my talk on full text search, I had used a lot the search function on the Django website. I then came up with the idea to investigate how that function was implemented. And I discovered that the database used was Postgres, but the search function was delegated to an external search engine. So on the Django developer mailing list, I proposed a change to replace the external search engine with only Django and Postgres. The discussion involves many Django developers who talked about it for a few days. And for me, it was very useful to understand their needs and the needs of the community. After the proof of concept that came out of the sprints, I worked hard on opening a fully functional pull request. And after a careful review, Tim Graham, the Django fellow, merged it a few months later. This is the Django website search. I have added more feature to it after my first pull request, and more feature will be added in the next month, I hope. Working on such an important site allowed me to learn a lot about Django and improve my skill as a software architect. And I also recommend that you try to contribute to the Django websites. You will help the community and you will improve your skill. In addition to the official Django documentation, I learned a lot from reading other developers' articles. Many speakers also had their own blogs and all recommends it as a personal improvement. So after some research, I decided to create a static website. I used Pelican based on Python and Jinja. I started by tracking all my talks on the site. I had a small Django how-tos article, and then I wrote bigger article. Writing article allowed to me to improve my technical writing skill and also the knowledge of the subject I'm writing about. This is a page of my static site. I recently updated the template by creating my own theme from scratch in order to have an original one and be able to add all the features I needed, such as the automatic switch to dark version if the device that displays it is in that mode. Writing my own template made me improve my front-end skill, and since we usually do backend, it was very instructive. I think I'm the first user on my own site because I often find myself rereading my own articles because I don't remember everything I wrote. One way to take even more advantage of the content you create is to share it. Collecting the comments and feedbacks you receive allow you to validate them and increase your knowledge. I recommend that you add RSS feed to your site so you can get your post to appear on the Django site. Adding a comment form to the sites also allow you to receive a lot of useful feedback that you can handle. An easy way to get feedback is also to share it on your social network with your followers. If, on the other hand, you are willing to receive critical, but perhaps even more useful comments, you can share your contents on news aggregator, such Hacker News. This is just the beginning of comments page of my first big article shared on Hacker News. To my surprise, it lasted several hours in top trend, attracting a lot of attention. So I got a lot of comments, some positive and some other negative. If you think you can withstand with even criticism, I also recommend that you share your content as much as you can. In the end, you will have learned a lot and have improved what you have shared at the beginning. But it's not for everyone. Another effective way I used to improve my knowledge of Django was to answer as many questions as possible from other developers. For example, at some point, I decided to go deep into the Django ORM. I studied all the official documentation, and then I went to Stack Overflow to look for questions with interesting problems, at which point I tried to solve those problems myself. I sent the answer, receiving several comments and votes. And in some cases, I even had the opportunity to write an article about it. To answer a question about the query set update with annotation, I found myself faced with a new problem for me. I tried to solve it, and I sent my answer even though there were other older ones also marked as valid. In the end, I got a lot of positive votes and a lot of comments. I then decided to write an article on the solution that I often reread every month. Basically, I solved a practical problem before I found it in my daily project. The English language has been a great barrier between my involvement in the community in the early days. But by studying also attending conference, I was able to improve my English skill. In the group of Italian developers, there are often newcomers who have troubles reading the Django documentation. A few months ago, I and other members of the group decided to add the Italian language to the Django documentation. To do this, we had to sign up for Transifex, locate and translated section of the documentation, and try to translate them. In case of dubs, we have relied on already translated strings and asked the others for a revision for the more difficult translation. Participating in this process was challenging, but at the same time very interesting and also fun, as you can see from the message of Claude Parot, the Django head of translations. However, by translating the documentation, I learned a lot about its structure. I discovered a totally new section, and I understood much better some terms that I always used only in English, because I was forced to translate in my own language, Italian. There are tons of other ways you can use to improve as a developer, and following as just some of other techniques that I also use. The time is your only limit. Subscribe on Django-related mailing list, check GitHub notification of Django and related project. Read the official forum, enter the Django Discord channel, join the local Django Telegram groups. So far, I've tried to list the way I personally use to get more involved with Django, and that I have served me as a personal improvement. But I recommend that you get inspired by other developers of the Python and Django community. To do so, I read their blogs, follow their social accounts, subscribe their video channel, listen their podcast episode, and read their books. It will be impossible to list them here. But at the end of the talk, you can find my social contacts where you can discover the people I follow and where I learn from every day. In case you found this interesting, I invite you to read and share this presentation too, because it's released with a Creative Commons license. Before saying goodbye, I would like to thank you all for taking part in my talk, the other speaker for their interesting talk. I also thanks the organizer who made this conference possible. In particular, I thank Emil and Benjamin for all the work they do for the Django community globally. Django Europe 2017 was one of the last in-person conference I attended before the pandemic. And this for me today is the first in-person conference I attended since the pandemic. So thanks for the hospitality. Grazie. I thank at the end 20Tab, the company that encouraged me and supported me in the journey. I have described it to you, and every day as a company contributes to Django and its community. You can find here all its contact. And finally, to find out more about my personal involvement with Django, you use all my content here. With this QR code, you can download this presentation from my website. And thanks again for having me, and enjoy the next talk in the conference. Ciao a tutti.
Paolo, we do have time for a question.
Yeah. Before question, I want to try again the things I did in the first talk. So I give a selfie with you all. with you. Okay, so it's a new start. Thank you.
So it's time for our first round of questions.
Wow.
And it goes like this, I think. First you go, audience, if you have a question and you can raise your hand, say the question, so that we can hear it. Then we'll just repeat it back to the recording, and then you can answer the question.
Perfect.
Does anyone have a question, or maybe just a test question? Yes?
Yeah, I've got a test question. So I was actually looking on your blog, like where you wrote up like that Stack Overflow article about updating with subqueries. And I was just wondering, like, why not add that to the official Django documentation? Like, if it's a useful, is it too niche, or what's?
I'll try to repeat the question. So on Stack Overflow, you have answered something that was quite popular. You showed in the slide, and the question is then, why is that not added to the Django documentation?
Yeah. That one. So this is the answer on Stack Overflow. It's only a matter of times, because I answered the question, then I wrote the blog article, and then I start thinking I have to add this in the Django documentation. But before I want to finishing improving the search on the Django documentation, I have to finish these other pull requests. So it's on the list, the thing I have to do. But this is the plan.
Thank you.
And contributing to the Django documentation is also a really good way to get started with contributing.
Yeah, I think my first contribution at all was a small typo in the Django documentation in Django 1.4, I think, back in the day, only because it was very easy to send. It's not required to open an issue in the tracker. So it's a way to try to contribute a little and to see your results immediately on the Django documentation. But also now I saw a lot of people contributing with writing. They know better English than me. They can rearrange and use more clear English. So if you know English good, or you want to improve the translation of your language, the documentation is a good starting point, I think.
It really is. Any other questions? I do have one.
Okay.
It will come in the form of a request, but you seem to be following a lot of different resources on Django, like podcasts and news and so on. Have you written them down somewhere that we can see?
Yeah, I never do that. No, I never did that. Sorry, but I show you before my connection. And in my, for example, if you want to know the people I follow, on Twitter, you can follow me and follow yourself. On my blog, I wrote an article about Django chats from Carlton and Vincent. I also tweet about the thing I find when I find it, but I never organize this on an article, a complete article. But maybe it's a good idea to a new article. Thanks.
I would love to read it. Another question. You have reached out, or you have been part of Django Girls, for instance. What can we say, like onboarding new members into the community? And how do we find those new members? Is there people who might not even know about Django? Should we advertise Django a bit more? Where should we go some places with the project to tell people about it for the first time?
Yeah, I learned myself Django Girls in DjangoCon Europe, I think, in 2017, and was very interesting for me. Also because there was girl from other areas not involved in Python or in programming at all. And I think it's a very good way to attract new members, increase the diversity. It's a real great experience in person. I think online is a bit different, and I coach girls 2 times in Rome and in Europa Python. But this year we are starting again. For example, I'm helping organizing PyCon Italia 2022 in June, Florence. And at the end of the conference, there will be again the first one in Italy, Django Code's workshop. And we are trying to interest in the people from school, teenagers, also people, to increase diversity. And I think joining as a coach is a very simple things to do. You are requested only to sit there and to speak with girls. It's not complicated to guiding people that don't know anything about programming in this workshop. It's a perfect workshop. And the guide is very clear, so you don't have to do anything particular. But it's very effective. In the first one, I met this girl that was there for the first time, and then they are on the organization of the PyCon Italia because she's get involved, and so it's a good opportunity for everyone, for the coach and for the girl.
Any more questions? Yes.
Yeah, thanks so much for the talk, Paolo. Very interesting. You said about how conferences, you found that it's first and foremost about the people, and the talks come secondary. And I completely agree. Like that's been exactly the same in my experience. What I found though is it seems like often the way things are set up and the way kind of everyone enters the conference is that the talks are kind of the primary thing, and then the people focus bits kind of come secondary at the beginning. So I'm curious if you found useful techniques for putting the people sort of first again in your attendance at conferences. Like, are there things you do to make sure you get the most people interactions out of it?
That was a really good question. I'll try to not elaborate it, but to shorten it. So while conference talks often are the magnet that draws people in, is there another method that can put people first in the conferences and attract them that way?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to present a conference speaking or the attendance or the speaker. So talk is a way to interesting people and a way also to share knowledge and your preferred subject. But in the early years, I usually went alone in the conference, and I need a way to start interacting with people. And I found that everyone was starting using social media. I used a lot of Twitter, and I found that starting interacting days or months before with people that are going to participate, it was a good way to meet them at the end and say, okay, I already know you because I'm tweeting with you since. And we did in this real conference yesterday with other speaker. We wrote each other. We shared our journey to come here from different country. And at the end, when we meet, we already was in connection. We had spent the night together. We had dinner, and now at the same, I recognize some other people here in this room for the past events or Twitter. And so this is a way to start a connection before we have this good opportunity to do it with social network or mailing list or Zurich or other things. So I think this is a way to start a connection with people. And then maybe also talk about the technical talks if you want, or if you're more comfortable speaking of technical things. Only this.
Any last questions? Yes. Tom?
It's more of a follow-up. I think there's a network technician conference coming up, and they simply made the breaks longer and the talks shorter because people are craving interaction much more than talks right now after 2 years of not having any interaction. So they basically just cut 15 minutes of all the talks and made the breaks longer. So that's just an idea.
Yeah.
We tried to, simply more breaks, less talks for people to be able to interact. during the events?
Actually, we did this idea in PyCon Italia. We are going to cut all the 45 minutes talk to 30 minutes to have more space between them, exactly because this.
Yes, it's hard for me not to comment. But of course, it's a compromise of sorts. And if that's the last question, then we will also have time for a coffee refill of 5 minutes. And starting again at 10:30, I'll ring the bell. Just 1 minute to find your seats after that. And then give Paolo a big hand.